So it's my turn. There's been a lot of this kind of video circulating around recently, even from the main Final Fantasy XIV channel itself, with quality animation to try and onboard new players. Whether you're a long-time player coming to try and check the validity of the points I make in this video, or a brand new fresh face poking around for more information, it says short in the title, so I'll make this as brief as I can. Just don't expect any drawings or actually funny content. That's the other guy. So let's start with the vast majority of the jobs. The DPS. You outnumber the rest of the jobs and even have a for fun mode job exclusively for you. Broken up into 3 categories, we've got 4 different playstyles. The breakdown of the jobs will be in the mindset of all tiers of play, not just any one level range. So let's get started with the I like pressing button jobs, the I don't like pressing button jobs, the I like moving jobs, and the I don't like moving jobs. Yes, I know Black Mage shows up twice. All of these jobs have their own unique quirks and intricacies, but they really do fall into these categories. What are DPS meant to be? Well, they're the jobs that do the most damage compared to the other roles. It's their job to kill the boss and do the mechanics of the fight when it's required of them. We all know that part, but what about the community expectations of DPS? DPS are the most abundant of the playable jobs, and because of that, there's an abundance of players who play them. The actual expectation of each individual job will vary a lot between player to player, but these core principles remain the same about the perception of the DPS role. 1. DPS will want to do their positionals and be close to the boss if they are one of these jobs. All the others will be wherever they manage to find a space of safety in the arena, even if it isn't actually a safe spot. This means that as a healer or a tank, you can expect DPS to be close or far from healing spell ranges or AoE ranges, depending on their job. 2. Each of the individual DPS jobs will have their own personality attached to their player based on the categories I described before. Because of this, you can ascertain as an individual how likely it is that a particular job will complete mechanics. People who like pressing a lot of buttons will usually spend more time watching those buttons instead of mechanics. People who don't like moving will usually ignore or wait to the last second to get out of mechanics. I'm looking at you, Black Mages. 3. DPS have the least amount of responsibility in 95% of the majority of combat content an average player will experience. This lack of responsibility attracts a lot of people to this role. Overall, if you're looking to improve your gameplay by watching a basics video, then here's what you can take away as a DPS. If you're a physical range DPS, stand near your healers, but don't stand near the boss. Any splash AoEs that stick to your character will endanger people who want to stand next to the boss, and if you have the ability to run around without impacting your damage, then stay away from the boss when avoiding mechanics. Take this scenario for example. This is a square arena with a boss in the center. This space is where the melee want to be so they can do their damage. This is the spot that the tank wants to be standing at. This is the effective healing range of AoE spells from the healers. Look at all of this room that you have to run around in and dodge splash AoEs and not run over each other. Oh, and casters? Stick within this green circle to hunker down to do all of your casting if you don't want to get the hook from off stage yanking you around. Now, let's get into the community-oriented types of players that you can expect to meet. This tank is too slow. I'm pulling. The impatient DPS. Whether they don't have that much time to complete a dungeon or can't sit still long enough to let the tank pull everything together, these players will run ahead or attack mobs early, causing them to steal aggro from the tank. I can tank this, I think. Greedy DPS. The bane of prog parties and endgame content and the drainers of healer MP. The greedy DPS will soak AoEs that they have plenty of time to dodge, or wait until the absolute last second to dodge if they can't soak it. Or just flat out die because they got animation locked. I'm looking at you, ninjas and dragoons. Though it's not all dire straits. If you need any help, just ask. There's the helpful DPS. These DPS are the friendliest DPS around and will be more than happy to help out a new tank or a new healer who's still learning the ropes of their job. These players tend to have all jobs leveled up and generally try to be the best person that they can. 4 different healers, 2 different types of healers, but very different unique playstyles across all 4 of them. All of them are casters, so they fall into the not wanting to move category, so let's focus on those diverse playstyles within their categories. Starting with the regen or pure healers, These two jobs have been given this title because they focus on providing regens and healing damage after it's been done. They work in tandem with the shield healers who want to try and mitigate and minimize the incoming damage to the party so that the healing that needs to be done is as little as possible in 8-man content. In dungeons, however, each of these jobs is strong enough to do whatever they need to on their own. What is a healer meant to do? Well, they're meant to heal the damage done by the boss with whatever toolset they have at their command. This is a point of contention in any game with a DPS, tanks, and healer role system, but this is my video, so this is my take on it. Healers are not your babysitters. Every member of the party is meant to avoid AoEs and do their best not to die. Obviously, this mindset won't apply to people going through the content for the first time. The little sprouts get a pass. I mean, just look at that little leaf. They don't mean any harm, they're just learning. If at any point you see yourself standing in that bright orange AoE circle and you think to yourself, I can tank this, then you're actively making every healer collectively sigh and reach for the rescue spell, or even worse, prepping their swiftcast res macro because, more often than not, no, you won't be able to survive that. Healers are meant to heal, but they can also do damage. And in all parts of the game, the group content goes faster and more smoothly when everyone is contributing in equal parts. Although there are some healers who don't believe in that. So let's get into the types of healers you can expect to meet while queuing up for content with randoms.
But did you die?
The but did you die healers always keep the main tank panicking and pressing every single cooldown they have at their disposal because these types of healers constantly greed for DPS and only do the bare minimum of healing. When confronted about this by the tank or the DPS about how narrowly a team wipe was avoided, the typical response from these healers would be, but did you die? Often thinks of themselves as a god gamer healer.
You can pull larger if you want to, tank.
The actual god gamer healer. These healers have found the perfect balance of knowing exactly when to use their cooldowns, efficiently and effectively healing and doing DPS, humble about their contribution to the party. These healers know how to play to the strengths of the tank they have with them, and most of the time go completely unnoticed due to just how well they can play their job. If you find one of these, then quickly add them to your friends list or FC and bring them along to every group content that you go through and marvel at why so many of these players are shield healers.
I'm a healer, so I'm here to heal.
The Cure Spammer. Now, this type of healer mostly shines through from white mage players, which is why it's called the Cure Spammer. But the sentiment can be shared across each of the healer jobs. These healers will only spam their lowest potency healing spells and contribute 0 damaging spells. They claim that they're playing a healer only to heal and that they don't need to do any DPS. Avoid these players like the plague. They cannot be swayed and their resolve is absolute. If you get a Cure Spammer in your party, you can be sure that the party won't wipe, but it's going to move along the content at a snail's pace. Oh, and as a healer, try to stand near the middle of the arena when casting your AoE spells, as they have wide radiuses, usually centered on your character. So if you want to make sure that you're catching everyone, then try and stand near the middle of the arena, so that you can get that pesky dancer or Viz-ranged flitting around everywhere. Back to some diversity. In our tanks, we have a few different playstyles to pick from that will affect your individual gameplay at any level of play above level 50. Though before level 50, they all play just about the same. Let's take a look at our categories. The I like pressing buttons tanks. The I don't like pressing buttons tanks. If you enjoy playing DPS that have a lot of buttons to press, then choose either Gunbreaker or Dark Knight to begin learning for endgame content. If you actually want to have a steady learning curve while leveling a tank, then pick Paladin or Warrior. So, as a tank, what are you meant to do? Well, it's your job to have the boss pummel your face in, and each of the jobs have a handy little button that makes it really easy for a tank to maintain the attention of the enemies when they remember to turn it on. In casual 4-man content, without the tank, then the whole operation just falls apart, so you don't want to die. Thankfully, you're given a few buttons across all of the tanks that help you stay alive. Rampart, Reprisal, and yes, even Arm's Length, are defensive cooldowns that should be pressed regularly in casual content as part of large pulls. Make sure to pay attention to the rate of incoming damage and how to use your cooldowns effectively. Here's a little cheat sheet to get you started. 1 pack of mobs. Typically needs 10% mitigation. Using only Rampart here will be fine. If it extends a little bit longer than the duration of Rampart, chuck a Reprisal in there too. 2 packs of mobs. Depending on the amount of enemies, you will need anywhere between 25% to 45% mitigation in order to not die. You can also pop your unique strong mitigation cooldown here, such as these for your individual job. 3 or more packs of mobs. These scenarios are incredibly rare in today's combat design, but when you can pull this amount of mobs, you want to evenly stay around 20 to 35% mitigation throughout your pull. In order to accomplish this, you can use smaller cooldowns in pairs, Rampart and Reprisal, then Arm's Length and your personal low cooldown mitigation after the first pair of abilities run out. Oddly enough, tanks aren't the job with the most responsibility in small group content scenarios, even if they're the ones who need to charge into combat first. As a tank, your basic responsibilities boil down to only 2 things: don't die, and gather up all the mobs and keep their aggro. If you want bonus points and thanks from your melee DPS in your parties, then try to keep the boss facing north and prevent the boss from spinning around too much so that the rest of your party has a point of reference for handling mechanics. What kinds of tank players can you expect to run into though? Well, there's a couple, but the variations are few and far between.
Fuck it. We ball.
The fuck it we ball tanks. These tanks are here to go fast, and if you can't keep up, then you get left behind. These tanks will always do the largest pull that they can, and usually are relatively good players, knowing how to space out their cooldowns effectively, but they keep an extremely fast pace. A majority of the time, you will find people who tank in this style playing warrior, as it lends to that same chaotic energy. We'll get there when we get there. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the snail tanks. These tanks are the equivalent of the cure spammer healers. These tanks are usually only just starting out, but some players never move out of this phase. The snail tank will only ever pull 1 pack at a time, and only use their primary AoE ability to deal damage and maintain aggro. They'll get the job done, but the job is going to take almost 3 times as long to get done. Hey healer, what size pulls are you comfortable with? And lastly, we have the natural leader tanks. These tanks are actively aware of everything going on at any point in multiplayer content. Players like these will often use their cooldowns or targetable heals to cover for other players who are having a rougher time performing in the content, using their abilities that can aid the party as often as possible and focusing on keeping the pace of the party as comfortable as possible. These players will often ask their healers at the start of a dungeon what size pull the healer is comfortable with, and will adapt to their pace to ensure a positive experience. All in all, the role system of FF14 is nothing extraordinary, but with its simplicity, it allows individual playstyles to be born and be viable. I hope that you learn something if you're an experienced player, or that this helps you along your path to becoming an experienced player if you're just starting your journey through the game. If you want to support the channel, then consider subscribing and sharing the video with your friends. If you're already subscribed but would like to support me further, then consider joining the people over on Patreon who keep my content coming. And remember that I want you to have a great day. Take care.